Awakening your everyday wisdom, love. It may take a lot of love to heal our planet and our society. There's a lot of destruction going on. We all know about climate change, and there's a lot of wealth disparity in the world, a lot of suffering happening. There's also beauty and sweetness and goodness here. I think the more we can ramp up the love, the better chances our species has of surviving. I'm envisioning a beautiful, peaceful, productive world. How we can achieve that vision is going to be up to us. I think love is the first start, the first starting place. So my concepts of love may be very different from yours. I'm just going to offer my thoughts and see what you think. I'll start with a biblical definition of love, and I really love this. It's from 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. That's why I think we need love. It can persevere through whatever challenges we're facing. So I think it's interesting to look at the various types of love. Most of us think of love as romance, but there's a whole lot more. So in the Bible again, there are 4 types of love that I found: eros, romantic love; storge, family love, and this could also be platonic love; and philia, brotherly love; and agape, God's divine love. I also found it interesting that the ancient Greeks identified not only these same 4 types of love, but some additional types. And I'll read these off to you. I'm not exactly sure I'm pronouncing these correctly. Philusia, that's self-love, positive self-image, self-care, and self-preservation. Pragma, that's enduring love, mature love, developed over time. Ludus, playful love, puppy love, infatuation, flirting. And mania, that's obsessive love, jealousy, possessiveness, control. I don't recommend that one. So let's take a look at self-love, because in our biblical definition it says that love is not self-seeking, but there is a whole nother concept of self-love that's not necessarily about just getting my way or all the things that I want in the world, but self-love is really about self-care. It's honoring ourselves. Now, there is a Hindu Buddhist term in Sanskrit called Ahisma, and that's not only about loving and caring about others, but it's also about self-love, taking care of ourselves, not doing harm to ourselves. And if you study yoga, you'll find that that also includes not doing drugs and other things that are hard on the body or hard on the mind. Ahisma is really doing wonderful, loving things for the body and the mind. So now let's take a look at a concept called extreme selfishness. And this kind of goes over to the far edge of the concept. I first heard this term when I was in my coach training program, and I went, oh, that is just wrong. I didn't go along with it at first. I was raised to believe that it's very bad to be selfish. Now, my mom used that as a way to control me. So I wasn't always, begging for this or that or stomping my foot when I wanted it my way. So she would say, oh, you're just being selfish. And so I knew that was a wrong, bad thing. Now I'm looking at selfishness as a very important part of self-care. And I'm not talking about greediness, and I'm not talking about causing others to suffer over us trying to get our way. I'm talking about paying attention to what you need and want, and finding honorable, wonderful ways of meeting those needs. Let's look at it a little bit further. The airlines. Whenever you're there, if you listen to those opening statements where they're telling you how to buckle your seatbelt and all that stuff, I keep wondering, why do they have to tell us how to buckle a seatbelt? But moving on. They also explain that when the cabin loses air pressure, the air mask, the oxygen mask, will drop from the ceiling. And they always caution you to put your own mask on before you help anybody else. When I first heard that, I thought, well, that's not right. You should put the mask on your grandmother and your child first. And then I got to thinking about it. Well, it makes sense because you can't help anybody if you're already passed out, right? So using that same concept of putting your own oxygen mask on first is what I'm talking about. Because you cannot be very much help in the world if you aren't taking care of number one. That's where we're going. There are lots of ways to practice self-love, and I'm going to read these off. Taking care of ourselves, that's the first one. And that's not just about getting enough sleep and rest or exercise and fresh air and good food. It's taking care of ourselves in a lot of different ways. Honoring our interest and the things that might excite us but don't really interest other people. Following that little inspiration, that excitement. And that leads into my next suggestion, doing what we love, finding out what that is. If we've spent a life in, I would call it servitude to other people, we may not know what we love. And it could take a little introspection, maybe some journaling to uncover that. Choosing the career that best suits us. How many of us get into a job because we need to make some money, and then we start to maybe advance a little bit, and pretty soon, we're in a career that doesn't really excite me anymore. Actually, I have even met a brilliant young doctor who said, my parents wanted me to be a doctor. I never wanted to be a doctor. So he gave up his practice and decided to teach sailing. That was going to be what he was going to do with his time instead of being a doctor. So that took a lot of bravery. Spending our money according to our own values. Not just spending it because we've been the victim of advertising or because our kids want a new bike or whatever. I'm saying you should definitely get your kids a new bike if you can. But choosing your values and then deciding how to spend your money according to those values. Participating in activities and creative endeavors that bring you joy. And eating the kind of food you enjoy. Yes, this includes chocolate and other things. We might have to exercise a little self-control in some of that. But really finding things that just make you happy. For those of us who have been abused, neglected, mistreated, it may be very difficult to not only love ourselves, because along with abuse comes a low self-esteem, low sense of self-worth, but it also makes it difficult to trust others, to love others. And it's easy for somebody who hasn't experienced what you've experienced to say, oh, you've got to forgive and forget and let go and move on. Well, yes, all that is true. You might need some help, some counseling to help you work through the many, many, many issues that come up if you haven't been treated right. So caring for ourselves is not narcissism or arrogance or selfishness. We really have to love ourselves first before we can love others. And that might seem like cart and horse kind of talk here, but it's true. If you can't love yourself, it's hard to love other people, and it's hard for them to love you. So it's very, very important to have self-love. I'm going to talk a little bit about the 5 languages of love. And this comes from a book by that title by Gary Chapman. And the reason I want to share this with you is because I think it's really important. We can get into very messy situations with people that we love just because we're not speaking the same language of love. And I'll give you a little personal story on that in a minute. But, you know, if you are expressing love in one way and your partner or the recipient of your love needs to hear it in a different way, your expression might be falling on deaf ears. And you might be shocked and surprised to find out, what, you don't think I love you? So here are the 5 languages. The first one is gifts, and the next one is touch, and then words, and then quality time, and then acts of service. So I'll talk a little bit about those in my personal example. So in a previous marriage, my husband and I were having difficulties, so we sought the help of a marriage counselor. And the very first thing this counselor did was he turned to my husband and he said, well, how do you know that Anne loves you? And he said, well, she makes me dinner sometimes. And I'm looking at him because on our 3rd date, I told him, don't expect me to be cooking dinner every night. Yeah, I like to do it on occasion, but I'm not that person. So I looked at him going, whew, that's kind of strange. And then he said, well, how do you show Anne or communicate to Anne that you love her? And he said, well, I fixed the toaster this morning. And I went, what? You fixed the toaster and I'm supposed to know that that means you love me? I was like getting all riled up. You know, marriage counseling can be a little rough sometimes. And the counselor calmed me down and he said, just wait, hang in there. And so he turned to me and he said, well, how do you know that Bill loves you? And I said, well, when he holds me, just a hug, closeness, I feel loved then. And he said, well, how do you let your husband know that you love him? And I said, I tell him all the time, probably at least a dozen times a week, I tell him that I love him. And so the counselor says, well, here's one of your big problems. You all are not speaking the same language of love. So the way my husband received love was through acts of service, cooking dinner. The way he expressed love was through acts of service, fixing the toaster. The way I received love was through a nice hug or holding hands. And the way I express love was with words. So he didn't feel loved by me, and I certainly didn't feel loved by him. The toaster is a good example of that. But it doesn't mean that one of us is wrong and one of us is right. It's the way we learn how to receive and express love when we're very, very little. So I recommend reading Gary's book and learning your languages of love and also your partner's or your lover's languages. It will help you a lot in those interpersonal relationships, not only in romantic and marital type relationships, but with your kids, with your friends. It really is an eye-opener. So when we look at love, some people think, oh, it's so complex, and they've given up on love. I've actually reached that point in my life where I gave up on romantic love for sure. You know, loving people in general, that kind of universal love, that comes very easily to me. But personal, intimate love was a little challenging. I had a lot of issues that I had to work through in order to be able to be loved and to receive love. If you find yourself in that position where you're kind of anti-love, check it out. You've got a huge heart inside of you. It is longing to be loved and to love. So when we go into part B, we'll talk a little bit more about the bigger picture of love, the spiritual love. But keep in mind that that is not a hierarchy of love. Sometimes just that loving of a friend, platonic love, is also an expression of spiritual love. Almost all of the kinds of love except mania come under the heading, the umbrella of spiritual love. But we'll dig into it a little bit more in part B. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening and participating in this video. If you'd like to chat, here's my email address. Feel free to contact me. I'm here to provide support. And please like, share, comment, subscribe. Thank you very much. Blessings.